In this one, we're focusing on a metal that has quietly become a top-tier national security priority for North America, antimony. With China tightening export controls and the U.S. having zero domestic production, the race to secure a local supply chain is on. Joining us is Jim Atkinson of Antimony Resources. His team is developing the Bald Hill project in New Brunswick, Canada. And in just the last week, they've reported a brand new discovery of massive stibnite at surface and have ramped up to 3 drill rigs to define what is shaping up to be one of the highest grade deposits on the continent. Jim, let's get straight into the news and the mechanics of 2026.
Sure, no problem. Let's go.
Well, let's start with your latest discovery called the Marcus West Zone. Since this appears to be parallel to the main zone that you already have, does this suggest that Bald Hill is actually a multi-vein system versus a single deposit? And how would that change the potential tonnage of the project?
Well, we think we're developing an antimony system, a mineralizing system. The new discovery that we found on the west, which was found, by the way, when the guys were constructing drill roads, they weren't looking for it there. It just happened to be one of their drill roads. But it does seem to be parallel to the main zone, and we think that probably there are several veins. Our modeling sort of showed a little bit that there were several different deposits, different veins, if you want to call them that. They're not really veins, but on the property. And of course, all of that helps because we have a certain amount of potential in what we call the main zone, but anytime we discover additional mineralization, it of course increases the potential. So again, that's sort of what we're looking at. We did some more work around that zone. Actually, I was there last week when the guys were digging it up a bit more and trying to expose it and try to understand it a bit better. Mm-hmm. So that was what we were doing last week. And yeah, we will be probably setting up a drill to drill some shallow, let's call them exploratory holes into this zone probably in the next few days. So we're pretty excited about it. Again, it's something that's never been seen before. But it does resemble some of our other mineralization. So we're pretty pumped about seeing where it goes and what it does.
What kind of drill density are you aiming here to ensure that you can deliver a maiden resource estimate by late 2026 or early next year?
Yeah, we think that 50-meter drill spacing will be sufficient for this. Of course, it's going to be really up to what our engineers say or resource geologists say, but we know, for instance, that some other deposits of antimony in the area, they seem to respond well to 50-meter drill spacing. Our drill spacing will actually be a little closer than that because we've already drilled 30 holes into it in various places, and the 50-meter space drilling will be sort of on a grid pattern we're trying to. So there will be, places where the drill spacing is even closer than that. But our task right now is to drill 10,000 meters into what we call definition drilling in the main zone itself. And meanwhile, we'll have what we call the Wanderer, another drill, which we'll be able to use around the area, exploring different showings, including the Marcus zone, but other ones that we know are there as well. So it'll be kind of like let's call it a two-pronged approach. We know that the definition drilling is very important, but I can tell you honestly, the exploration drilling is a lot more exciting because you find stuff, right?
So can you also talk to us about the vein widths, consistency you're seeing with them across the main zone as you're testing to depth?
Well, we're finding it pretty consistent. The modeling showed up that there are, let's call them pods that you can join up and turn them into, sort of three-dimensional volumes. We also know that we've drilled it down to over 400 meters, and it still seems to be fairly consistent, although the character of the mineralization is changing a little bit, but it seems to be pretty consistent down to 400 meters. So, and we've traced it over 700 meters in length, and it's still open in both directions. we will be focusing on probably the main part of it, which is about 600 meters, but we know it extends beyond that. And we will probably be focusing on it down to 300 meters because that will give us a good, let's call it a good volume for our resource. But we're certainly not, we're certainly not thinking that it's closed off in any way. In fact, we have trenches with mineralization, you know, 400 or 500 meters to the south. Seems to be the same stuff. The whole area in between has not been explored. That's one of the things that our wanderer will do. So we're pretty sure that it's not closed off in any direction, really.
Let's talk about permitting. Knowing that it's never a given, despite how premier a district may be, have you begun the environmental baseline work here? And do you see any federal, let's say, critical mineral designations helping to fast track your path?
So we have begun our permitting process, including baseline information, but also things like consultations with the local community, the First Nations, all the things that will be required in a permit. We've been working very closely with the New Brunswick government, and the consulting firm that we have working on this aspect of it actually has very good relations with the New Brunswick Department of Environment, Department of Indigenous Affairs, Municipal Affairs, all the various stakeholders. So we're actually pretty advanced in that. We also have another consulting group doing what we call a technical gap analysis. What that means is that they will be taking a look at some of the aspects that we have to study. For instance, things like geotechnical aspects, or perhaps even what kind of mining is going to be important. So all of that stuff is really being done right now. We have a metallurgical study being done. All of that is being done to really fast track our production decision and theoretically our production timeline as well.
Okay, well, this kind of goes into my next question as you talk about metallurgy. I've read that antimony can be very notorious with difficulty with processing, but knowing that you're working with high-grade stibnite, where do you stand currently with metallurgical testing?
So metallurgical testing is ongoing. Preliminary testing was done in the past, and they got 96% recovery. And I don't know where you got your information, but in fact, antimony floats very well. Some of the challenges that they have are these associated metals, including things like arsenic and even gold or some of the base metals. But generally, when you have a project like ours, which is really an antimony project, most other projects in the world are, I was going to sneeze, are actually gold projects. But ours is basically a pure antimony project. So we don't know yet what the detailed metallurgy will be. One of the things that we're trying to study in our metallurgy, we know antimony can be recovered very well. Like I said, preliminary metallurgy, 96% recovery and producing a very high grade concentrate. We do have a little bit of gold in our project. We don't exactly know how much. We assay it for it, of course, but we haven't sat down and tried to understand. But one of the things that the metallurgy will do will be to, first of all, to try to understand where the gold is by doing some mineralogical work, but also by trying to say, okay, well, if we use this process, we might be able to recover a little bit of gold. And of course, a little bit of gold would help in the mining eventually. So yeah, metallurgy is ongoing. It's being done by RPC, who are a very competent lab right in New Brunswick, not far away from the deposit itself. And we anticipate that'll be done in a month or so.
So you can confirm that you're able to produce military grade concentrate, right, of at least 70% antimony without needing a complex, expensive refinery?
Well, no, what we'll be producing is concentrate, and yes, it'll be high grade. You know, the probably in the order of 65% antimony, which is almost pure stibnite. But also, you know, that will have to go to additional treatment to produce antimony. And one of the other things we're studying right now is the potential use of a technique called hydrometallurgy, which means if we had hydrometallurgy possibilities, it would mean that we could produce antimony metal right at the mine without having to deal with a smelter. So right now, the challenge in North America is that there's only one small smelter. It's in Montana, and if a few antimony projects come on, there's going to be no capacity for smelting. Right now, all the smelting pretty much is done in Europe and in China. The Australians who are producing antimony concentrate ship their concentrate to China for refining. And there's not a lot of processing abilities, even in the world, certainly not in North America.
Now, my last question to you is in two parts. Number one, does the U.S. government consider Canadian supply as domestic? And then number two, have you had preliminary discussions with government agencies or defense groups regarding strategic offtake agreements or project funding?
Yes, the United States government considers antimony very important. We know they've been putting money into a lot of different aspects of it, including, Perpetua, which is a stibnite mine in Idaho, which received grants and also got loan guarantees from the U.S. government. But there's a few other operations that are kind of trying different experimental, or let's call them, trying different ways to deal with the antimony, and the government has put some money into that. And to answer the second part of your question, yes, we have had discussions with not only the American government, but also the Canadian New Brunswick government. Canadian government has put in place let's call it a critical minerals, not necessarily a fund, but a critical minerals review group, and they have taken a look at our project. United States Department of Defense, now called the Department of War, is very interested in antimony, and we have made some contact with representatives of that group, including a group which has been working with critical metals in the United States for the U.S. military for over 3 years. Mm-hmm. So they certainly understand what we have and what our potential is. I would mention, just as an aside, we're only 85 kilometers from the U.S. border, and we're only like 85 kilometers from a deep sea water port in St. John. So any concentrate that's produced will be easily handled and can be shipped anywhere, yes.
Okay, well, always good to see you, Jim. We'll see you in the next one. Thank you for the update.
Okay, no problem. Thank you.
Jim Atkinson of Antimony Resources, ticker symbol ATMY. Thanks for watching.